Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the time I almost fumbled a flat in London by telling the property manager that I take medical cannabis. Yeah, and it was nearly my biggest L of 2024. But before we get into it, hit that like button, drop a comment, and if you want to, consider subscribing. It helps me a ton. Thank you. So the story goes, in 2024, me and my girlfriend were searching for a flat in London for a long time, and I mean, we were searching for months and months. And if you don't know, most flats in London, they look like this, and they cost an arm and a leg. After some time, we found it, the most beautiful flat for our price range. It had room to move around, came with a balcony, and it had been recently renovated, and the renovation was stunning. Kudos to the landlord and their architect slash interior designer, I guess. After a viewing and a discussion with the other half, we signed on the dotted line, parted with our money, and it was just a short wait before we moved in. Now this is where things start to go wrong, and as most things, it's my own fault. I knew that I was under no obligation to tell the property manager about my medical cannabis prescription. It's legal, it's prescribed, and it's my business. But just a little bit of background, medical cannabis was legalised in the UK on November the 1st, 2018, following amendments to the Misuse of Drugs Regulation 2001. This change reclassified certain cannabis-based products for medical use from Schedule 1, meaning that it had no recognised medical use, to Schedule 2, and this allowed specialist doctors to prescribe medical cannabis in cases of exceptional clinical need. However, despite this legalization, access remains limited, with prescriptions primarily being issued through private clinics rather than the NHS. But maybe one day we'll get it on the NHS. Fingers crossed. Anyway, back to the story. And this is when my fumble came in. Me being me, I thought I'd do the right thing and be transparent, upfront, and be a good tenant. The tenancy agreement had the usual clause that stated there should be no smoking or taking of any substance anywhere on the property. And that included all share spaces, like the hallways, and definitely not on the balcony. So for whatever reason, I thought, hey, I'm going to give the property manager a little heads up. What's the worst that could happen? Right? Now, I wasn't about to do this before signing. I'm not that naive, as I really did think that if I told them beforehand that they would go, yeah, we don't want you anywhere near our property and it's gone to someone else. As I'm sure to the landlord, someone who takes cannabis, even though it's legal for medical reasons, that I could be someone who could be more hassle than it's worth and I could cause damage to the flat. So once I had the keys in hand, and I had essentially moved in, I emailed the property manager and explained that I'm a medical cannabis patient. I've been prescribed cannabis for my disabilities, and at this stage all I wanted to do was just clarify the smoking rule. And the next day I got a reply, and yeah, it wasn't great. I don't know what I was thinking really. The email was short and sweet, but as expected, it wasn't great. I don't know what I was thinking, to be fair. They had copied and pasted that exact clause that I was referencing and simply said that cannabis, medical or not, was not to be taken anywhere on the property, and the "not" was in bold, just to emphasise that point. And at this stage, I went into all-out panic a little bit. I was a bit like, oh god, have I just shot myself in the foot? What happens if I can't take my prescription? We've just spent all of this money. Or worse comes to worse, what happens if they kick us out because they don't want us in here because we violate their tenancy? But like I said, I'm not overly surprised. Cannabis is still like a real taboo topic for a lot of people, and despite it being legal, many people just don't have a very good education around cannabis, and that's okay. Like, I don't expect everybody to be super knowledgeable on the topic because it is a strange niche area, and because there is so much taboo, people still view cannabis in a very negative light. So I tried to do the right thing. I emailed back and tried to educate them a little bit. I explained that I'll be vaping, not smoking it. I thought the smell is what they would be most worried about, so I thought if I could ease their worry essentially about that vaping is far less smelly than smoking, because vaping you don't actually combust the cannabis and there's no essential harmful byproducts, no smoke, that vaping is a much cleaner and less smelly alternative. Don't get me wrong. If you vape in a sealed room, you're going to know that there's been cannabis vaped in there because it still smells, but not on the same level as if you were to light up a joint. In the email, I was polite. Don't get me wrong, I was frustrated, but I didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want to drag my heels and kick up a fuss because I knew that that wouldn't help me. So I shot that email off, and again, I was nervous. I was like, again, what happens if they find a loophole and kick me out? We've just spent all of this money on this flat, and we've signed up for a year, so we could be out of pocket a lot of money. I sent this email on a Friday, and I had the weekend to reflect on this. Not only was I hitting my head against the wall, like, why did I do this? But little did they know, I had a little cheeky ace up my sleeve. And again, I didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want them to think people who take medical cannabis or who have certain disabilities are just trying to be awkward for the sake of it. We have different needs, and medical cannabis is recognized as a medicine, and I can't be stopped taking my medicine. But on Monday, I received another email saying that the landlord does not want cannabis to be used anywhere on the property, full stop. However, this email triggered my trap card, and that cheeky ace that I mentioned, I decided to throw at them. And that ace specifically was the Equality Act 2010, specifically Section 36. This section places a duty on landlords and property managers to make reasonable adjustments for disabled tenants. This means that if a disabled tenant is at a substantial disadvantage due to a policy, practice, or physical feature of the property, the landlord has to make reasonable steps to alleviate that disadvantage. However, I think it's important to note that landlords are not necessarily obligated to bear the full costs of these adjustments. While they may consider and implement reasonable changes, they can require tenants to cover the expenses associated with these modifications, including maintenance and potential restoration costs upon vacating the property. So my next email kind of went like this. I let them know that I understood that most tenancies don't come with a specific outline about how medical cannabis is going to be handled. I don't know any residential landlord that would have a specific outline on this. However, I explained under the Equality Act that they had a duty to make reasonable adjustments for tenants with disabilities, and I was happy to discuss this and how we can make this work respectfully, as I still wanted to take my medication, but I also wanted to respect the property. Then radio silence. It took about 4 to 5 days for them to respond, and I'm convinced that they were scrambling in their office to figure out how can we shut this guy down. And then I got a reply, and their response simply was, "We're willing to make arrangements to accommodate my disability." So victory! Kind of. It's been 9 months, and I still have no idea what these arrangements actually are. They never followed up, and admittedly, I never followed up with them. At this stage, I was done with the whole thing, but I also firmly believe that I shouldn't be the ones telling them what reasonable adjustments I should be making in their flat. I felt that they should be telling me that where I could and couldn't vape, as it's not my property. And don't get me wrong, I really appreciate them saying that they would make these adjustments, and with my victory I could have gone really petty. I could have sealed all the rooms, hotboxed every day, sprinkle my used cannabis all over the furniture, or vape directly into the neighbour's letterbox. But like I said, I didn't want to be difficult. I want to show them that people with disabilities or additional needs just have different needs. They're not trying to be difficult. I'm really curious, how do you guys manage your medical cannabis at home? Are you more discreet, or do you just not care? Drop a comment and let me know. So, what do I do now? I know for the landlord the best case scenario would be for me to vape off the property. I'm not doing that. London lives up to all its stereotypes. It's wet and cold most of the time, and I'm realistically not going to go downstairs every time I need to vape. So what I do now is I just vape exclusively in the bathroom and in the kitchen. Both of these rooms have extractor fans and large windows, so I just crack the windows, turn on the extractor fans and vape. Don't do it in any rooms with soft furniture like sofas or the bed. But quite funny, around 4 months later after this whole thing, the property manager actually had to come to our flat to pick up some letters that kept being delivered to us, and they knocked on the door and I answered and said, "Oh, hello," and handed over the letters, and they kind of stood there awkwardly in the doorway, and I kind of sheepishly said, "Do you want to come in?" They did the classic thing of doing a once-over of all the rooms, and I said to my girlfriend when the property manager left, they came into every room and did a big inhale. But to this day, I'm still unsure if I actually did the right thing. A part of me is proud that I stuck to my guns and actually fought my case. I was respectful, and ultimately my needs were met. That being with a little bit of resistance. But the other half of me is like, this was far too much hassle than it was worth, and I was under no obligation to let that property manager know, and realistically, they probably never would have known or found out. So, should you tell your property manager or landlord? I'm going to be really cringy and say that this is up to you. I can't make this decision. You will always be protected under the Equality Act as long as your medical cannabis is medical and you have a prescription. And by law, landlords do need to make reasonable adjustments, but there are small terms and conditions with that, of course. It's not just a get out of jail free card. I know landlords don't always have the best reputation, but we can at least be respectful and show them that we're not difficult people, we just have different needs. And hopefully this video has helped you make a decision whether you think it's worth it or not. So what would you have done? Would you have kept quiet, or would you have told them? I suspect it's the former, but I'll be interested to see what you guys think. So yeah, that's my little story time about how I almost fumbled a flat because technically I'd violated their tenancy agreement, and to this day I technically am still violating it. But like I said, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you want to, and thanks again so much for watching this video. Take care.